as I am about to embark on this interview with one of the most courageous, loving, and fearless writers I know. I'm getting emotional before we begin because I see myself standing in room 203 and looking out into a sea of students, and I see Kanya, and I see Sokum, who freedom writers called Bunny, and Raru, and Susan. And this is their story. And I was so lucky to have Cambodian students who came to Long Beach via refugee camps in Thailand, via their soil in Cambodia. And so the story that we're going to learn today firsthand is really near and dear to our story. So Loung, I am so honored and so humbled that you are going to take us on this incredible journey of your story. And I know you often say that your story holds up a mirror to others, and it is their story. So thank you for bestowing us this gift of sharing your incredible story with us today.
As you were sharing your story of being a teacher and looking out at your Cambodian students, it actually took me back to when I was a student in America. When I first came here and I was 10 years old and I didn't speak English, and how much I would have loved to have a teacher like you, to have a teacher who knew something about Cambodia, who appreciates Cambodian culture and understand a little bit of Cambodia history. Having a teacher like you would have made so much difference in my life when I first came to America. And I am so grateful to you for the work you've done and are doing, and so happy to be here to speak to you.
You know, when I think about your academic journey, it parallels your humanitarian journey, because you, at the age of 5, in this bustling city, the capital of Cambodia, with a loving father and a courageous mother, and you were one of 7 children. Take us back to being 5. Take us back to 1975 and how different 1975 in the capital of your country was to being 10 years old in rural Vermont.
My father was Cambodian, my mother was Chinese, and so I grew up in a very multicultural household where we spoke Chinese and Cambodian, and my brothers went and studied French, and the girls went and studied English. And then we also at home ate with chopsticks and spoons and forks and bowls and plates, and we listened to music and songs in all different languages, in English and in French. And so it was very diverse, and I love that. I love that about growing up, about my childhood. We were privileged in that my father was able to afford for us to go to school and to protect us from the war. And therefore, I did not know anything about this group called the Khmer Rouge. In the Khmer native language, they're called Khmer Kraham, the Red Cambodians, the Cambodian nationalists. I didn't know anything about them. So when they came into Phnom Penh, the city of my birth that was populated by 2 million people in 1975, it came as a complete shock to me. And so when the soldiers came, and they came wearing huge smiles, wearing black shirts and black pants, and they were dirty, but they looked happy. They had guns on their back and grenades on their belts, and they started pulling out their bullhorns and started screaming for us to leave. All this time, people poured into the streets, applauded their arrival because they thought the war was over. And they thought the war was over. We were happy to see them. And I was carried into this happiness. And then to just be told by the soldiers, you had to leave. The Americans were coming and they were going to bomb and they were going to bring war to the city. And if we didn't leave, we would all be killed. And they told us we had to pack as little as we could to sustain us for 3 days. After 3 days of bombings, they lied and they said we could come back home. And so we packed as little as we could and we left. Phnom Penh was populated by 2 million people, was evacuated in 72 hours. Those who refused to leave were killed and harmed and tortured in their homes, in the hospitals, on their doorsteps. An estimated 20,000 Cambodians would die on that one evacuation.
Wow. I know that you said you had privilege. Your father was educated, had an amazing job, and oftentimes in war, they target the intelligentsia. That's the first that they try to eradicate and evacuate. So I had read that your father put all of you in a car and you just drove until you ran out of fuel, and then you had to walk. So talk about that, what that was like, thinking, we're evacuating, we'll come back in 3 days under this false pretense, under this lie. What was that like for all of you to cram into these vehicles? And what did you take? And where did you go?
2 million people carrying what they could, their pots and their pans, cows and wagons and bicycles and trucks, flip-flops, slapping against soles of feet, children crying, everybody screaming, everybody in fear. It was just so loud, so overwhelming. And when my father and my brothers and all of us loaded into the car, and I watched our world change, our country collapsed, our people desperate, I held on to that one hope. And I believed it with all my heart that after 3 days we would stop. The line of human suffering would stop. We would all turn around and go back home. The day my father bent down to my eye level, looked me in the eye, and told me we could not go home, told me the soldiers lied. It was so difficult to hear that, but it was even more difficult to see the sadness on his face. He had to break my dream. He had to crush my hope. And that must have been so difficult for him. I am so grateful and blessed to live to be an age where I could have a different perspective, where I can understand these things now, because I did not fully appreciate the courage and sacrifice my father had to take in order to protect us.